Welcome back to Beyond the Groom. This is a special edition with our very own Dr. Faver. Just from a more laid back perspective, from my personal point of view, how much longer do you and your lovely wife want to do this and run yourself ragged? I know that you love it. That's apparent and evident, but I mean, you got a nice cabin with the Rio Grande in the back. It's probably tough to leave sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes and some days it is tough. Eventually, what we'll do is have to reproduce ourselves and, get people that will be able to fill in some of the blanks. And, that's part of the growth of any company. As I always say, you start off the jack of all trades, and then you start specializing more and more. So, we're at that point that we'll start adding people probably with time, and we'll bring them in, and then we'll have to train them to be able to do what we want to do. To totally back off, I used to think I wanted to retire at 65 and kick back, but I'm going to tell you that somebody told me once there's honor at dying at your desk, and I had a hard time processing that. But the point being is, a lot of times if you're doing something you're passionate about, that's what keeps you young, and that's what keeps you moving. And so, this is kind of second career for me in a roundabout way. And I'm going to say I'm still enthusiastic. I still love what I do. So, I don't see us quitting, in the near future by any means on that. We do need to slow down. That one I will admit to that we can't keep this pace. Because one thing as you age, you find out you can't do what you used to do. So.
And that's totally reasonable. And I hope that you guys go as long as you still enjoy it. But I mean, that you gotta, coming off the road after a weekend like Groom Expo, and I know you had something right before and something after. There's got to be aches and pains and soreness. I mean, I travel a lot for my other jobs, and I drove to Vermont and back the other day. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I feel like an old man.
Well, from just to put it in perspective, from August to November, we went to Chicago, Super Zoo. We're going to Hershey. We're going to New England. We're going to Fun and Sun, and we're going to go to Australia.
Jeez, and Australia alone is like a year's undertaking, like recovery and preparation. So that's incredible. But spreading the good word and spreading the great message of education along the way. Do you still have anything that you see at these trade shows, or maybe even on Australia? I know you go to New Zealand. Do you still have anything that surprises you? Have you seen every angle at this point, or are you still shocked sometimes?
The shock I have, it's not necessarily, shall we say, the problems or some of the stuff we see. What shocks me still is the results that we get. There's times that I look at something and say, oh, that's going to take a while. And then it heals almost instantly. And it literally blows my mind because I don't expect that. And I would say on a fairly regular basis, I see those kind of things. We have some of Lisa Cathan down in Texas. Some of the work she's doing just is mind blowing. How fast she can turn a dog around that's literally on euthanasia list, and within 3 or 4 weeks, they go from a hairless dog to hairs and adopt it out. Some of our wounds, we're starting to do some wound management now, realizing that's a little dicey because we can't get into the veterinary side, but we're healing wounds in just a fraction of the time. Ones that are disaster, a lot of them are groomers dogs that we're working with because, like I say, they can do that on their own. But that's a whole nother aspect that we haven't got into. Horse work, I'm always blown away. Horses heal so fast, but it really doesn't matter the animal. I mean, we've done goats, we've done cows, we've done giraffes. I mean, all sorts of different animals on that, which keeps it fun also, because it's always nice to have a new challenge.
Speaking of challenges, I was going to ask you, does a case come to mind that was a typically difficult challenge, or something that you felt almost insurmountable that you were able to overcome?
There's a lot of them going into it that I didn't think we were going to have great results, or we had results so much faster than I ever expected. And honestly, they're too numerous to count. It happens on such a regular basis that there's not one that particularly sticks out. I would say some of the elephant skin cases, especially in the beginning, where that skin has changed. It's been like that for 5 years. And to be able to turn around, those are the ones that impress me the most in the beginning. but I'm going to tell you they've almost become routine now because we see it so frequently and are able to take care of it. Some of our sebaceous adenitis cases, in veterinary side, I just didn't see good results on that. And, I'll give you an example. We have a board certified dermatologist that was working with a case for a year and a half. And I don't know whether the groomer or the owner heard about us and got going on our products. They called back and they said in a week and a half, they had more growth than they had in a year and a half with the dermatologist.
Wow.
So, when you start hearing that stuff, like I say, it blows my mind. And that's not me saying that. That's the client and the groomer saying that. I didn't even see the pictures, honestly. That's just their word on that. So those kind of things, like I say, they're exciting, but that's what keeps us moving. But the products are amazing if they're used correctly. The results are just mind-blowing is all I can say.
Let's talk a little bit about business. I always like to pick your brain on that because you have so much experience, so much longevity. We talked a little bit previously about how the internet, social media, things of that nature, artificial intelligence is becoming huge, and honestly, it terrifies me. It makes me feel old.
Yeah.
With all those changes, there's got to be some universal truths or some universal decorum that still applies to business today, whether it's offering a good product, communication. In all of that vast array of changes, is there any commonality that you see or any staples that you're like, all right, well, this is still the same. I'm going to rest on this. I'm going to innovate and adapt with the times, but I'm going to stick to my laurels on certain things that I know are tried and true.
Yeah, I think a lot of the new technology probably relates more to the marketing side of the business, and that's really all over the board. I always tell people I never had a business class in school whatsoever, not one, not in high school, not in college, whatever. And the good news about that, or the bad news is, I don't know all the tried and true principles. The good news is I didn't ever have to think inside of a box. I always kind of looked at what was going on and tried to learn from it and do that. And I feel like it served me very well overall. Could I have done better? Probably, if I'd followed that, but I found my way through that. So the marketing was probably the toughest part because, like I say, I don't have any of that. It's as you say, when you get older, it's hard to keep up with all that. It's happening so fast on that. But I think there's some basic principles, and I teach some business courses, and I really enjoy those. Quite honest with you, and I get some very positive responses out of them too, because it's just common sense type things. And if I had one backbone thing that I think helps most business people, especially ones that are struggling, is the 80-20 rule. That 80% of your income comes from 20% of your clients. Because when you understand that, you understand that a lot of times the people that messes up your day the most are not in that group. Those aren't the people you need to worry about. In fact, it goes the opposite, that 20% of your clients give you 80% of your complaints. So stop worrying about the 20% people that are complaining, because don't let them mess with you, because that's not where your income comes from. And also, there's a point that you need to let those people go, because every appointment slot a bad client is filling is one that you can't fill with a good client. And so when you start applying some of those basic principles, it can change your world. I love the story. I had a veterinarian tell me once that for Christmas, what he got his staff every year is they got to fire one client. That was their Christmas gift. And he said they would start planning in October who they were going to fire on that. But, the point I make with that is sometimes we're keeping people that are making our life miserable, taking our joy away from our life, when let them go. They're not worth it. Get some good people in there, people that love you or respect you, and give them something to respect. There again, that's why education is important. If you do your job well, then people can respect you and follow you and love you, and then get rid of the ones that don't, because they're just going to be a nightmare for you at the end of the day. So, like I say, that's probably the biggest thing that I deal with. One other tidbit that, and I'll throw it out here because this is a good time maybe to discuss it. A lot of employers have troubles with employees. And so one of the little quick tidbits that I'll throw out there is judging an employee by being competent or committed. Now, if you have an employee that's competent, committed, that's your best employee. If you have one that's incompetent and not committed, you fire them. That's an easy one. The problem is if they're competent and not committed, or committed and not competent. The question is, what do you do with those? The biggest detriment to most businesses is the one that's competent, that's not committed.
Mm.
And we don't like letting those people go because they are so skilled at what they do. But they are the quickest one to kill your culture. They're the quickest one to make your life miserable. So you're much better off on having an employee that's committed, that's not competent, because you can teach competency. You cannot teach commitment on that. So, just another little tidbit that throw out there. If you understand those kind of things, and look at the bigger picture, a lot of times it'll change your world, because at the end of the day, we need to enjoy what we do. If we don't enjoy what we do, then, life gets real boring and tough to get up in the morning.
Man, I think that is such wise words. I think that applies to sports teams. I think that applies to academics. I think that applies to relationships, personal relationships. You may not always do the right thing, especially as men, but if we are committed, we can learn and we can adapt, and it might take us 12 to 15 tries, but we're committed to getting it right eventually.
Yeah. That's the only way I passed typing, quite honest with you. I was committed. I was a terrible typist. I was not competent, but if I could do it over enough times, I finally would get it. And I passed with an A even.
And that's interesting that you say that, because I'm a little bit younger than you, but I remember when in typing class back in 9th grade, and I struggled a little bit. Now I'm really fast, but even back then, I've never thought we'd type as much as we actually end up typing. So you really never know. But like you said, I was committed to it. I really wanted to get it for some reason, but I was like, I don't even use the computer that much. Well, now that's all we use.
Right.
Crazy to think about. But another thing that I wanted to ask you about, as it pertains to business, and one thing I think groomers and people who will listen to this and watch this will actually benefit from greatly. I've heard in almost all of your seminars, it's almost like an empowering moment. You often urge the groomers or the business owners to raise their prices, and at first they look almost apprehensive, like it's a terrifying thing, because they don't want to ruffle any feathers, or they don't want to get people out of their comfort zone. But you don't do it out of a place of greed, or say you need to make more money so you can buy more Yves Saint Bernard products. Nothing like that. You're saying you need to know your worth and establish those boundaries. So how do you instill that within someone who walks through the door of a seminar and empower them to do that?
Well, first of all, that's kind of business 101. Your costs are going to go up. If you're not increasing your cost proportionally, then what happens is you're working for less and less money. I'm going to say a vast majority of the groomers right now that own businesses would be better off just being an employee. They would earn more money. And to me, that's a very sad statement. And realizing when I'm talking to groomers, I've consulted with a lot of veterinarians that are the same way. In fact, veterinarian practices, a lot of people think the veterinarians are making all sorts of money. Most veterinary practices, their profit margins less than 5%, which nobody would invest in that. You can get that in a CD. So why not just take your money and put it in a CD? So they're not good business people either on the end of the day. But a lot of times we don't know our worth, and we don't charge for our worth on that. And so what happens is we're struggling. We're helping all these people out, giving them this wonderful price, but we're struggling to survive. And that's not the way it should be. As a professional, we need to earn a decent wage. And I'm not saying, like you said, it's not about being greedy. It's about making bills, not having to worry about tomorrow, not having to worry about your retirement. There needs to be all those things in place. Otherwise, what happens is we work 20, 30 years, our body breaks down, and now we've got to figure out how we're going to live at that point. And if you look around, there's groomers that are, 70, 75 years of age that are still out there grooming big dogs. That doesn't make sense to me. I always joke about the 50-year-old that now all they're going to do is small dogs because their body is broken down. And even talking about Suzanne, she's got rheumatoid arthritis. She can't do this, at a certain point in her life on that. So you have to think about those things and protect yourself and make enough money that you cover your basis on that. But with that, And I always say you have to raise the bar. We have to be professional if we want to get paid as professionals. We have to be educated if we want to get paid as professionals. So all those things become important. So with the education, I think it goes hand in hand with a lot of the business aspect.
1000%. And I think that is one thing that people don't even realize that they're going to get from your seminar, because they do, you touch on that and you go deeper into that in the seminars that I've had the privilege of sitting in on and filming and helping sort of facilitate. And even though I'm not in the grooming industry per se, I took a lot away from that. And if you don't establish your worth, I mean, no one's going to say, hey, you know what, you did a great job here. They might give you a tip, but they're not going to say, I'm going to pay more. Meanwhile, the world around us, every price in everything is competing. And when it's a big name brand, we don't bat an eye at it. But when it's something that we know we're passionate about from someone who owns their own establishment and has been good to us, sometimes people seem apprehensive or almost combative with it. But you really have to set that boundary and then stand your ground. Is that correct?
That is, and we lost a lot of groomers in COVID because of that exact thing. They didn't have any reserve on that. I'm fully expecting to lose a whole bunch more groomers because we just went through a period of inflation of 7.5%. And if you haven't got up to times and raised your prices at least 7.5%, you're going backwards. You're hurting right now. And I have talked to multiple groomers here in the last couple of months that they're literally working more hours just so they can pay their staff. So they're not setting those parameters. They're not, taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture here, and groomers are in demand right now. So it's a perfect time to kind of be upping that, and like I say, even if you're just keeping up with inflation, at least you're not going backwards, because backwards you cannot survive. And eventually your costs are going to eat you up and you're going to go out of business. And that doesn't do anybody any favors. So as I told my staff a lot of times and my clients, the best thing I can do for you is to stay in business. Because if I'm not in business, I can't help you on that. So we have to kind of mutually respect the fact that we got to stay in business on this stuff.
In this industry, and given all the things that you do you have any goals left that you feel like you have yet to check off the list? Or do you feel like you've achieved everything that you set out to do, but now it's just sort of morphing that to the needs of the customers and the clients?
No, I still have one big goal yet, and that's to get this information out to the veterinary field. Train the groomers. Just my basic philosophy is I know veterinarians don't do baths. So if we're talking about using topical products, I know that, going to them and teaching them how to do a bath is not going to be the way to go. So we started off with the grooming industry. And what I wanted to do is get an army of groomers that understood things so that when the veterinarians recommended it, they had somebody to send them to. But my ultimate goal is to get into the veterinary field and change the way of thinking that they're dealing with, because there again, we're not going to fix a lot of these pets if the veterinarians keep doing what they're doing and don't see the other side of the picture here. So if we can get that information out there and do that, we're going to change a lot of things. Now, the one problem with it, and I always joke, it's like pushing sand uphill. We're going to be going against the grain. We're going to go against a lot of the things that we're taught. So it's not going to be an easy undertaking, but it's one that I would really like to take on and eventually get there. We're going to need as much support and as much help, from groomers and people around, people that have seen successes as we can, because the veterinarians are not going to be easy to change their mind. They want to see a research paper, and the kind of research papers they want to see, small businesses can't do. I'm not a Pfizer or Novartis or one of the ones that have millions and millions of dollars on that. So, it's really hard to provide them the information that they think they need in the process. So, like I say, we're going to have to go in there with common sense and good science and then figure out from there.
Well, Dr. Faver, I have no doubt that you and Suzanne and your team are going to achieve that and then some. Greatly appreciate what you do. Greatly appreciate your time. Thank you again for enlightening us and taking us beyond the groom. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jordan.